Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to see. I want to see. This is the series that we have been developing now for the last few weeks, and we will continue it through to next week. I want to see. Now, we all know, of course, that for each and every one of us, sight is something that is important, but it's not just seeing with the physical eyes, it's also seeing with the spiritual and being able to see beyond this reality. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago when we began this series, we had James and John. If you remember, they were the two that were blinded by their ambition. There they were, these same disciples who a couple of weeks even before that were put in their place by Jesus, who said, "You want to be the greatest in the kingdom? What are you arguing about?" And now they try to slip in again and again, try to do it, completely blind to the mission that Jesus was doing. All they could see was their own ambition, their own desires. Then, of course, came the next week, the blind Bartimaeus. The blind Bartimaeus is an interesting character because here's this physically blind individual who in the crowd was the only one that could really see the truth about Jesus. He was the only one that with his eyes of faith knew that all he had to do was get to Jesus. But that whole crowd around him was completely blind, and they were the ones going, no, we're prejudiced. We have our preconceived notions. You're a blind man. You're a beggar. Stay away from the master. What's wrong with you? And yet his persistence paid off because he got a hearing with the master and then said those famous words, "I want to see." And Jesus could have easily said to him, "You already do see, but here's your sight anyhow." Then it kind of changed a little bit last week. Last week we get that whole shift to the question that was asked of Jesus, what is the greatest of the commandments? And of course we all know. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And in giving us those great commandments, Jesus set the tone, if you will, for Christianity. He didn't make it a minimal thing. It's with all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. He didn't just say, get to a plateau and leave it that way. I want to see, and yet so many of us struggle with what it truly means to love, much less to love the Lord and one another. We know how to do certain loving things, but a lot of times we never truly appreciate the depth and the power of what that word love really, truly does mean. Something very transformative. Then we get to this week. And this week we have a very interesting contrast going on here. We have the two widows. And the two widows, who both, by the way, remain nameless. We don't know who they are. You would think somebody would have recorded it because they were just so wonderful. But maybe that's the way of also telling us, too, this is an icon. This is an image for everyone. That widow of Zarephath, let's face it, the prophet comes up and says, "Go get me some food." And she goes, "I got one bite left in there. I don't want to give that up." And any logical person would have said, "No way. It's not going to happen. I'm going to end up starving anyhow." But in trust of the prophet, in trust of God, she goes in and does it, and the miracle occurs. God provides for her needs. For over a year, she's able to eat, and not only she, but her son and the prophet. Well cared for, all going back to the fact that she was able to trust God, to trust that God would not fail her. Then you see the widow in the gospel. And there's Jesus. It's kind of an interesting thing. Could you imagine if Jesus was standing over your shoulder when the basket came around? But we won't do that to you, I promise. But there's Jesus standing by the treasury and has this widow who throws in her last coins. She has nothing more to give, but still gives it. And there Jesus is able to make a very strong point. A very powerful point. Now, here's the thing. I stand here this week before you as your pastor, as the canonical steward, if you will, of this parish. And in the bulletin this weekend, I have put the numbers for the parish. All of the financial reporting, and I'm responsible to do that at least once a year. And here's the weekend I've decided to do it. So you can look in the bulletin yourselves, you can spend a few minutes, you can pore over those figures, and if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to ask. I want to be completely transparent about it because I remind myself of this again and again. So many people say that this is my parish, but it's not. It's your parish. I'm just the canonical steward of taking the gifts that you give and see to it that they're used wisely and well. And so I always hearken back to a couple of little things. Number one, the first half of the gospel. A lot of us pastors, we want to just start with the second half of the gospel where Jesus is saying put more money in the treasury. But what about that first half where Jesus is kind of laying into the religious leaders of his day? You walk around in long robes, and you want the respect of all these people, and you take all of their stuff, and you leave them with it, and you don't lift a finger to help anybody. I don't want to be like that. And so I have to truly examine myself time after time and ask myself, what is it that this is all about? And so I always remember when I was first ordained, until this day, it's the same thing. I did not become a priest to worry about the checkbook. I didn't. Do you know why I became a priest? I became a priest to help you get into heaven. That's my first priority. My first priority is to remind all of you that heaven is real, and so are the other realities. And so we have to always be working in this life to get there. And we do that, of course, by our prayer, by our fasting, by our generosity, by being in a state of grace, by participating in the sacraments. And we, your priests, we are here to constantly remind you of that. You can ask Father Thomas or Father Francis why they were ordained, and they'll say the same thing. Not to worry about money, but to get souls into heaven. That's why we became priests. And that's why you'll hear me saying it over and over and over again in homilies. It's what we do. That's why we did it. And so we constantly will remind you to get on track if you're not, to go further if you are, to push yourself in the spiritual life, to be a good person in this world, to serve God, and to love God with everything, not just a little bit. And so on this weekend, it's my responsibility to let you know of the parish finances. It was your money. It still is your money, and I'm just a steward of it. I sit with the finance committee on a regular basis. We discuss what we have, we discuss what needs to be done, and then we go from there, and we make decisions based on what's in front of us. But that, to me, is a very small part of what I do. This weekend, I want to use a word that I know Catholics really, they kind of react and cringe to every time we use it. It's the word tithe. Catholics don't like that word, and I can appreciate that because it's one of those tough words. Giving 10%, really, Father? Well, Jesus made it all last week, so I'm only asking for 10%. Come on. Actually, I'll be honest with you. I discovered what the word tithe really means. The problem I have with the way the word has been used again and again and again is it becomes formulaic. Let's make a little formula out of this. Let's turn to the people and say, here's the formula. Take whatever you make, $5,000, 10% of that is $500, give $500. But that's not tithing, really. That's just a formula. To me, tithing is much, much deeper. It's actually a spiritual reality. It's actually a spiritual reality of looking how much God has blessed me. I mean, so much that he's bestowed upon me. Everything that I have is from him. You might think that you own things, but you really don't. God does. And God has gifted them upon you, some in greater measure, some in lesser measure, but God has gifted you with whatever he's gifted you, and then we're to make a return from that to him. And so with the Old Testament concept of tithing and the way the Jewish people interpret it or the way the Protestants interpret it, they go with that strict 10%. It's an exact number. Here's your formula. Do it. But what I discovered is I'm not here to tell you how much to put into the collection. In fact, I'm going to say this as clearly as I possibly can. I do not stand here before you telling you how much to put in the basket. I really don't care what you put in the basket. I really don't. And I want to be clear about that. But I do ask you this question. Have you prayed coming to church? Have you recognized the blessings you've received? And then ask yourself the question about tithing, the spiritual question that's a lot harder to answer. What am I holding back from God? From all that he gave me, what am I holding selfishly to myself? Because greed and material possessions can blind us. And a lot of times we are blinded by it. And so we don't see the needs of others. We don't see the reality. In fact, we're more like the rich young man from a couple of weeks ago. Jesus said to him, give away everything you have and come follow me. And what happened to him? Another person, we don't know his name, but we know he went away sad because he had a lot of possessions. What are you holding back from God? The widows today didn't hold anything back. This is what I've got. I give it back to you, Lord. And they were both richly blessed, tremendously blessed. And so, my dear brothers and sisters, I encourage you today. I know you're very generous. That's why I'm not going to go into any specific amounts. I'm not going to give you a formula. It's not about that. It's not about that at all. In fact, it's about prayer, and it's about the spiritual reality of acknowledging everything we've received from God, and then just making that return to the Lord. We sit here week after week, time after time, and we wonder, and we might want to question that, but pray about it. And if you've got more and can give more, great. If you have less and can give less, great. It doesn't make a difference, the number, as much as it is the spirit behind it. And for those of you who don't have and are unable to, and if you need help, we, your brothers and sisters, that's why we're here. We have a wonderful St. Vincent de Paul Society. If anybody in this community is struggling, we're here to help too. Your generosity has made that possible. In fact, today's second collection will go to the Vincent de Paul to help them continue doing the great charitable works that they do here. It's not ours. It's a gift to us that we're stewards of for working for the greater glory of God. And so I say again and again to myself, I look at my own life. I look at how I had a conversion on this. There was a time in my own life when I was pretty cheap. I would give hardly anything when the basket came around. I would hardly do anything. And I started to ask myself, why am I doing that? And I prayed about it, and that's when that question came to me. Why am I holding back from God? Why can't I be more generous with what He's given me? And I started to give more and more, up to the point of 10%, and I've never wanted since then. I've never worried since then. And just like we are here in this community, all of us have to give, then give. And I let you decide that. In prayer, you pick that. You decide what you're going to return to God. Think of all the blessings you've received. Think of how graced you've been. Think about how wonderful things are. But I go back to, again, the fundamental reason I'm your priest, and the reason that I'm here is to get you into heaven one day. That's the only reason I'm here. And if I have to do it without this building, I can still do it without this building. As you've seen, we've been outside a number of times. We could just go over there, and even in the freezing cold. We can do it without the creature comforts we're used to. We can do it without all those things. That's why I don't obsess over money, and I don't obsess over the checkbook. As a good steward, I look at it, I balance it, and I make sure it's okay, but I put that on the back burner of my life. I would much rather be working with you closely on making sure that you're on the right path, of making sure that you're doing good things. And that's why we priests are here. I mean, anytime you're struggling spiritually, we'll help you. That's why we're here. Anytime you're struggling materially, we're here. We will help you. We're a family. We're the children of God. We don't let our own go for want. So if there were a Bartimaeus amongst us today, we take care of Bartimaeus. We don't cast him out. We help Bartimaeus. We don't throw him away. That's what we do. We're brothers and sisters. And so, my dear brothers and sisters, on this day most especially, I appeal to you as your pastor, as the steward of this parish. I appeal to you in this way. Thank you. Look at the numbers in the bulletin and you can see this parish has risen to the occasion. We've done well, even through a pandemic. It's been a strange 2 years for me. I got to admit, I just can't get my mind around certain things. But all of you did rise to the occasion. Our regular numbers are pretty good. And I'm thanking you for that. You are generous people. You do have that spirit within you. And so all I say to you is, this parish is yours. It rises or falls on your generosity. And it seems to me that we're rising, and I hope we can continue to rise. God has blessed us so greatly here, and I say to each and every one of you from the depth of my heart, thank you for that. Thank you. And I join with you in trying to give back to the Lord from the very depth of my being, as much as possibly can. We priests, even though we don't make a lot of money, we try to give back to the Lord from the depth of our hearts as much as we possibly can. And so I ask each and every one of you today, pray. Pray this week. Pray about how much you give. And if there's something that you're holding back, ask the Lord to help you to see. Say the words in prayer, Lord, I want to see, and I want to see the beauty of all that you give and all that you've done for me. And then I want to make a return to you in any way that I can, as much as I can. That's all up to you, and I give it back to you. Thank you once again for all your generosity, and may the good Lord continue to bless you richly and to give you, to fill all of your needs based on how much you have returned to Him. God bless you.